Have you ever wondered why you were born in a particular month and not another? Most people dismiss it as coincidence. But for centuries, both Eastern mystics and Western thinkers have asked a deeper question. What if the timing of your birth reflects something essential about your character? Now, we're not talking about horoscopes or fortune-telling. This is something far more grounded. As Carl Jung explored in his work on archetypes, each person carries unconscious patterns that shape their behavior. And what if your birth month holds clues, not to your fate, but to the kind of inner battles you were meant to master? As a lifelong student of Stoic philosophy, I believe the most powerful insight comes when we stop looking outward for meaning and start reflecting inward. In the words of Epictetus, know first who you are, and then adorn yourself accordingly. That's the spirit of this series. Each month, January through December, represents a different psychological rhythm, a different energy, a different challenge. Whether you're a quiet observer or a fiery leader, a born caretaker or an intuitive dreamer, Stoicism teaches us not to be ruled by our nature, but to refine it. In this video, we'll explore the 12 Stoic archetypes hidden in each month of birth. You'll hear ancient wisdom, relatable stories, and timeless reminders about self-mastery, discipline, emotion, and purpose. Most importantly, you'll walk away with a clearer understanding of how to live with virtue in a world full of noise. So, which month were you born in? Drop it in the comments. Let's see if your temperament matches what the Stoics would expect. Don't forget to subscribe to Stoic Focus if you enjoy thoughtful reflections like this. We're building a community of minds who value calm, clarity, and character above all. Now, let's begin. Starting with January, the quiet force. January, the quiet force of endurance. If you were born in January, you likely carry a presence that doesn't demand attention, but earns respect over time. You may not speak often, but when you do, your words tend to land with weight. In a world full of noise and performance, you are the kind of person who finds value in what is steady, real, and quietly powerful. The Stoics would recognize in you something they deeply admired: the strength that does not boast, the dignity that doesn't need applause. Like the stillness of winter, your character is formed not in the light of spectacle, but in the cold clarity of solitude. To the Stoics, life was not about how loudly one could live, but how well one could govern the self. January-born individuals often come across as wise beyond their years. There's a grounded quality to how you observe the world, as if you've been quietly watching long before anyone noticed. That in itself is a form of Stoic awareness. Seneca wrote, "It is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste much of it." You, more than most, understand the value of time. You don't chase trends or rush into action. You pause, you reflect, and when you move, it is with purpose. There's something about you that reminds people of the archetype of the elder, the sage who speaks when others have exhausted themselves. You're not drawn to chaos. You prefer discipline, routine, and results built over the long haul. You do not mind hard work, but you expect it to mean something. This is why the Stoic concept of endurance fits so closely with your nature. You were not born to be flashy. You were born to be formidable in silence, the kind of person who outlasts, not outshines. But with such inner strength comes a hidden cost. Many January-born people find themselves misunderstood. Because you do not seek validation, others may think you are cold, distant, or disconnected. The truth is often the opposite. You feel deeply, but you prefer to process emotions internally. Stoicism does not demand emotional suppression. It encourages emotional clarity. That means understanding your feelings, honoring them, but never letting them drive the ship. You embody that balance more naturally than you realize. As a child, you may have been asked to grow up too quickly. You might have been the one who kept things together when others fell apart. This created in you a sense of responsibility, but also a pattern of withholding. In Stoic thought, this makes you a candidate for prohairesis, the idea that our greatest freedom lies not in our circumstances, but in how we respond to them. You've likely faced moments where silence was your only ally, and still you stood tall. That is not weakness. That is discipline. That is philosophy in practice. Still, even the strongest foundations need renewal.
Your great challenge is not in doing more, it's in softening the grip. You may believe that being strong means never letting go, but Marcus Aurelius reminded us, accept everything which comes to you, woven in the pattern of your destiny. For what could more aptly fit your needs? Letting go is not giving up. It is trusting that life, in its own rhythm, unfolds without our constant control.
Joy is often delayed in your life, not because you lack the capacity for it, but because you prioritize duty over delight. But the Stoics did not reject joy. They simply warned against foolish delight, the kind built on things outside our control. The joy they encouraged was calm, inner, and earned. For you, joy is rediscovered when you allow yourself to loosen the armor, to laugh at the absurd, and to be surprised by the moment you didn't plan. People like you often become the rock in other storms. You're the one who can be relied on, who stays calm when the world spins. This is a noble quality, but it comes with the danger of isolation. Remember this, even the wise need warmth. Even the strong need to be seen, not for their performance, but for their quiet resilience. The Stoic path is not about removing yourself from the world. It is about engaging it with presence, principle, and peace. And sometimes, that means opening up, even if just a little, to let someone in. You don't need recognition to be valuable. You don't need to shout to be heard by the right ears. You are a living embodiment of the Stoic ideal of constancy, the ability to stay true when others waver, to move forward without the applause, and to persist with clarity even in uncertain times. You are not here to impress the world. You are here to hold a light when the world forgets how to see. So if you were born in January, consider this not just a birthday, but a calling. A quiet one. One that doesn't need ceremony or song. Just a reminder that in a world racing toward noise, you are the calm. In a culture obsessed with speed, you are the rhythm of the long game. You were not born to burn out. You were born to endure with grace. And in that, perhaps more than in anything else, you remind us what true strength really looks like. Yoki, February, the Stoic rebel with a gentle heart. If you were born in February, chances are you've never quite felt like you belong to the mold society laid out for you. You see things differently. You feel things others don't notice. And from a young age, you probably heard the phrase, "Why can't you just follow the rules like everyone else?" But the Stoics would smile at this, not with judgment, but with understanding. Because one of the central ideas in Stoicism is that the true philosopher does not conform for comfort. He or she lives according to reason, not popularity, not convenience, and certainly not social pressure. February-born individuals are often the quiet revolutionaries. You don't wear your rebellion like a flag. You live it like a philosophy. You challenge systems not for the thrill of conflict, but because you see through the cracks that others ignore. You're not drawn to shallow order. You crave deeper truth, even when it's inconvenient. Marcus Aurelius once said, "What stands in the way becomes the way. For you, those obstacles, rigid norms, outdated expectations, shallow conventions, aren't roadblocks. They're invitations.
Invitations to think differently, to build a better path, to live honestly, no matter the cost.
But rebellion without direction is just noise. The Stoic view reminds us, true freedom is not the absence of rules, but the mastery of self. And that's your life's tension. You're pulled between the need to be true to yourself and the pressure to fit in. This tension is not a weakness, it's a forge. When refined, it gives birth to clarity. When scattered, it leads to isolation. The question isn't, should I be different? Because you already are. The real question is, how can I live my difference? With discipline. Many February-born souls are drawn to creativity, to intuition, to vision. You may have had dreams others called impractical. You may have walked away from traditional success to chase something more meaningful. Art, healing, spiritual growth, or quiet solitude. And though you've likely been judged for it, you persisted. That is Stoic. Not the kind of Stoicism that hardens the heart, but the kind that refuses to betray the self, even when the crowd doesn't understand. But this fierce independence comes with a cost. You often feel alone in your journey, misunderstood, too deep, too idealistic, too hard to label. The Stoics, too, were misunderstood. Epictetus was once a slave who became a philosopher. His words were not always welcome in the marketplace. He wrote not for fame, but for those who could bear truth. You, like him, are a seeker. But seeking requires more than openness. It requires grounding. And here lies your great challenge. Because your heart is open to possibilities, you feel deeply. Sometimes too deeply. The energy around you doesn't just pass by, it enters. The world's chaos becomes your burden. The pain of others becomes your ache. This is where Stoicism offers you medicine. It doesn't ask you to stop feeling. It asks you to filter what you feel through reason. It teaches that empathy, when directed without judgment, becomes compassion. But when allowed to run wild, it becomes anxiety. You must remember, not everything that touches you deserves to shape you. You are sensitive, yes, but you are also strong. Your strength lies not in being untouched, but in choosing what to carry and what to let pass. You are not a sponge, you are a vessel. Let the useful in, let the rest flow through. And then there's your vision. You see a better world, not just for yourself, but for everyone. But often, that vision gets trapped in your head. You dream, but forget to act. You imagine, but hesitate to build. The Stoics believed that wisdom without action is hollow. You are not here just to think beautifully. You are here to live courageously. To create systems where others only complain. To take one practical step, even if the goal feels far away. Don't let perfectionism stop you from progress. Even the smallest action, done with intention, is Stoic. You also tend to doubt yourself, not because you lack ability, but because your standards are impossibly high. You see what could be and judge yourself for not being there yet. But the Stoics would remind you, progress is the goal, not perfection. They taught that we are all in training, and so are you. Give yourself grace. You are allowed to grow in public. You are allowed to be unfinished. You don't need to be like everyone else. You were born to illuminate what others can't see. But remember, even the brightest stars must be anchored by gravity, or they burn out. Your soul is visionary. Your purpose is freedom. but your practice must be discipline. That's the bridge between your gifts and your fulfillment. So if you were born in February, let this be your quiet vow. I will live authentically, but not aimlessly. I will honor my difference, but not make it my shield. I will let my rebellion be guided by wisdom, and let my heart remain open, but protected. You are not here to follow the script. You are here to write a better one, not with noise, but with the calm certainty of someone who knows they're walking their own path. And as the Stoics taught us, there is no greater freedom than that. March, the quiet alchemist of suffering. If you were born in March, you may have grown up with a strange sense that you are carrying something older than your years, a kind of silent knowing, a heaviness that doesn't always make sense, like someone who's lived through storms before ever stepping into the world. The Stoics wouldn't have found this strange. In fact, they would have said you are one of the few who've been gifted with an early awareness of life's deeper truths and the burden that comes with them. You feel things that others overlook, not just your own emotions, but the unspoken tension in a room, the grief behind a smile, the fragility in another person's silence. The world doesn't just pass through you, it echoes. This sensitivity may have once made you question your strength, but in the language of Stoicism, what you have is not weakness, it's depth. And the deeper the soul, the darker the waters it must learn to swim. March-born individuals often walk through life with a quiet resilience. You may not scream your pain or display your struggles, but that doesn't mean you haven't suffered. In fact, many born under this month carry invisible wounds, often from childhood, from losses unspoken, or simply from feeling like they never quite fit. Epictetus once wrote, "Difficulties show what men are, and you, more than most, have learned to rebuild yourself, not loudly, but silently, from the inside out." You are what the Stoics might call the alchemist. You take raw pain and turn it into understanding. You process life slowly, reflectively. And when you speak, it comes not from ego, but from earned perspective. But here's the danger. In your search for meaning, you may sometimes drown in your own depth. You may romanticize suffering, thinking you must endure it endlessly in order to grow. The Stoics would caution against this. Pain is not the goal. Growth is. Suffering may refine the soul, but staying in suffering when it's no longer necessary, that becomes self-imposed bondage. You need solitude like others need oxygen, but too much time alone can become a trap. The Stoic path asks us to be with ourselves, but never cut off from the world. You may find it easier to comfort others than to ask for help. You carry others' stories, but often struggle to speak your own. But what good is wisdom if it is never shared? What healing can occur if you do not allow others to meet you halfway? Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher-emperor, reminded himself daily to open yourself to others if you would be healed. You live by intuition more than logic. You sense things others haven't put into words yet. This makes you a gifted listener, a natural empath, a friend who seems to understand without judgment. But it also means you absorb more than you need to, and if you're not careful, the boundary between your soul and someone else's pain disappears. That's why, for you, Stoicism isn't about closing your heart. It's about building a gate. Let in what nourishes. Let pass what poisons. Your emotional intelligence is a gift, but only when paired with discernment. In times of despair, you may escape into daydreams, poetry, art, or introspection. There's nothing wrong with these things. They're your language. But the Stoics would warn you not to build a home in the fog. Reality, no matter how brutal, is the only place you can act. They believed philosophy was not meant for the classroom, but for the battlefield of daily life. So if your inner world becomes too loud, anchor yourself in the present. Clean the kitchen, call a friend, Write one page. Walk. Choose motion over musing.
You are not here to save everyone.
That's another quiet trap you may fall into. Because of your compassion, you may feel obligated to carry others, to heal them, to fix what is broken in their world. But the Stoics would remind you, each person is responsible for their own soul. You can love deeply, but love is not control. You can support, but not sacrifice yourself in the process. It is not noble to drown in another's storm. What's noble is to become a lighthouse, steady, bright, unshaken. Your greatest challenge is to honor your emotions without being governed by them, to welcome them, even the dark ones, as guests, not as rulers. Stoicism doesn't ask you to be numb. It asks you to be brave in the face of feeling, to step back and say, this is grief. This is fear. This is uncertainty. But I am not these things. I am the one who sees them. And in that seeing, you reclaim your power. If you were born in March, your calling is quiet transformation. You are not here to compete, to conquer, or to dominate. You are here to guide, to listen, to absorb and reflect, to transmute pain into poetry. But you must also learn to come back from the inner world, to engage with the one in front of you. Because the beauty you hold within is exactly what the world is missing, and only you can give it. You were not born to live untouched. You were born to feel and still choose virtue. You were born to walk through the storm and still speak with kindness. And in a society that often fears emotion, your gift is your courage to sit with it, to name it, and to use it not as a burden, but as a bridge. That is Stoic mastery in its most human form. April. The warrior who learns to wait. If you were born in April, you probably know what it feels like to move faster than the world around you. Your thoughts leap ahead, your instincts are sharp, your will is like a flame, eager to ignite, hungry to act. You are the one who kicks the door open while others are still debating whether to knock. You don't wait for permission, you blaze your own trail. But the Stoics would ask you, is it a fire you control, or one that consumes you? April-born individuals carry the archetype of the pioneer, the initiator, the spark that lights dormant energy into motion. You are driven by action, by the desire to build, to lead, to leave your mark. Marcus Aurelius would have called this your active principle, the part of the soul that doesn't just observe life but insists on shaping it. And for that, you are to be respected. The world needs people like you, those who don't wait around for motivation, who push against stagnation, who rise before others are ready. But the Stoics warned of something important. Impulse without reason is recklessness. You are powerful, yes, but power without discipline is volatility. It's the sword that swings too quickly. It's the voice that speaks before understanding. Your greatest strength is also your greatest test. You don't need to stop moving, but you must learn to pause with purpose, to breathe before reacting, to assess before charging forward. Because the strongest warrior is not the one who fights every battle. It's the one who chooses which battles are worth fighting. You likely don't hide your feelings. Your face speaks first. Your energy walks into the room before you do. In that way, you are honest, direct, refreshing. But sometimes directness becomes sharpness. You may hurt others without intending to, not with cruelty, but with unfiltered intensity. Stoicism doesn't ask you to become quiet or distant. It asks you to become wise with your fire. Seneca wrote, "Anger, if not restrained, is frequently more hurtful to us than the injury that provokes it. What you say in 10 seconds of heat may take years to repair. What you begin in a rush may be abandoned just as quickly.
April-born people often struggle not with starting, but with staying. The beginning excites you, the idea, the vision. But when that energy cools, when the hard part begins, the repetition, the maintenance, the slow refinement, you may feel trapped or disinterested. This is where Stoicism becomes your teacher, because the Stoic doesn't just act from passion, they act from principle. They do what is needed, whether it's thrilling or tedious, whether it lights the ego or humbles it. Your soul craves freedom, but discipline is the path to freedom. Not spontaneity, not adrenaline, discipline. You also carry the burden of the leader. Others look to you for momentum, for decisions, for drive.
The wed that I really have at the case is a person.
That's a gift, but it can harden into control. You may believe that if I don't take charge, nothing will move. But part of becoming a true Stoic leader is realizing you don't have to command every room, win every argument, or fix every problem. Sometimes, the greatest form of power is knowing when to step back, to trust, to listen, to wait. In doing so, you invite others to rise, not just follow. You don't fear conflict. In fact, part of you may feel most alive when there's something to push against. But the Stoic asks, are you fighting out of ego or out of virtue? Are you arguing to prove your worth or to seek what is right? Not every fight deserves your energy. Not every challenge needs a response. The wise warrior fights only when the cause is just, the mind is steady, and the outcome serves something greater than pride. When directed inward, your fire becomes self-mastery. When turned outward without control, it becomes destruction. You were not born to destroy. You were born to ignite hope, to lead through example, to bring energy where there was once stagnation. But you must also learn how to manage your flame, or risk burning out, burning others, or burning the very bridge you're trying to cross. Your challenge is patience. Patience doesn't mean slowing down your pace. It means elevating your timing. It means becoming the kind of person who doesn't just start strong, but finishes wisely. It means learning the value of stillness, of silence, of watching before doing. In those quiet moments, your true strength matures. If you were born in April, you are not here to play small. You are here to stir the still water. But remember, motion without depth is just splashing. You must learn to combine your natural drive with the wisdom of restraint, your passion with reason, your instinct with reflection. Because when those qualities meet, you become unstoppable, not just in action, but in integrity. You are the fire starter, the trailblazer, the first one in and often the last one out. But your greatest evolution is not in how fast you move. It's in how well you direct your force. The Stoics didn't admire raw energy. They admired controlled strength, purposeful will, unshakable character. You don't have to fight every moment. You just have to learn when to stand, when to lead, and when to wait. Because the warrior who learns to wait is the one who conquers, not just the world, but himself. May, the builder who finds strength in stillness. If you were born in May, you likely carry a calmness that others instinctively trust. You're not in a rush to prove yourself. You don't speak just to fill silence. You move through life with a kind of rooted presence, like a tree that's been standing for decades, quiet, consistent, and deeply connected to the ground it grows from. To the Stoics, this wasn't passivity, it was wisdom. You remind us that the loudest voice isn't always the wisest, and that true progress doesn't need to be dramatic to be real. People born in May are often drawn to beauty, not the flashy kind, but the kind found in small things done well. You notice details, you take your time. You enjoy the rhythm of routine, the order of things in their place. the satisfaction of work done properly. There's a quiet devotion in how you live, a loyalty to the people and values you care about. Stoicism calls this constancy, the practice of showing up fully, not just when it's easy or exciting, but day after day, especially when no one is watching.
You're not easily shaken. While others are chasing trends or bouncing between ideas, you prefer to build something real, something lasting. Whether it's a home, a relationship, a career, or a way of life, you want what you create to endure. This is one of your greatest strengths. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Dig deep within yourself, for there is a fountain of goodness ever ready to flow, if you will keep digging." You understand that. You don't expect instant results. You know that growth takes time, effort, and faith. But this desire for stability can become a trap if you're not careful. Because you value comfort and familiarity, you may resist necessary change. You may stay too long in situations that no longer serve your growth, jobs, relationships, patterns, because they're known and the unknown feels too disruptive. The Stoics would gently challenge you here. Do not mistake comfort for peace. Do not mistake stillness for virtue if it's rooted in fear. Seneca warned us not to become slaves to luxury. And luxury doesn't just mean wealth or possessions. Sometimes it means the luxury of routine, of avoiding discomfort, of clinging to what feels safe. The Mayborn spirit is steady, yes, but steady doesn't mean stagnant. You were not born to float, you were born to build. And building means change, risk, and renewal. You have a deep connection to the material world. You enjoy beauty, nature, texture, food, art, the feeling of something real in your hands. You don't live in abstraction, you live in the tangible. And that's a good thing. The Stoics didn't reject the material. They simply reminded us not to be owned by it, to enjoy beauty without becoming dependent on it, to hold things loosely knowing they may leave us. Epictetus said, "Do not seek for things to happen the way you want them to. Rather wish that what happens happen the way it happens. Then you will be happy." In other words, let the world move. You remain grounded, not by holding on, but by learning how to let go when the time comes. In relationships, you are loyal, nurturing, dependable. You take your commitments seriously, and people rely on you for emotional stability. But sometimes, you give too much without asking for anything in return. You absorb discomfort to keep the peace. You sacrifice your needs to avoid disrupting others. And over time, that silence becomes weight. The Stoic path reminds us that kindness is not submission. Virtue includes courage. If something is no longer right for you, no matter how familiar, no matter how stable, it is Stoic to leave it. Not in anger, not in bitterness, but in truth. Your challenge is to step out of the comfort zone when it's time. To recognize that your love for calm can sometimes keep you from evolution. That your ability to endure can sometimes lead to unnecessary suffering. There is virtue in holding on, yes, but there is also virtue in knowing when to release. You are not just the builder, you are also the one who must occasionally rebuild, to reimagine, to step away from what's merely familiar and toward what is truly aligned. You have the patience to build something that matters, the wisdom to stay the course, the humility to work quietly, without applause. The world often overlooks people like you, because it celebrates the loudest. But the Stoics knew better. They taught that the strongest souls are the ones who need nothing extra, who know who they are, who stay true to their principles, and who treat life as a craft, not a contest. If you were born in May, your gift is steadiness, but your challenge is growth. You were not made to live in a shell of comfort. You were made to shape something enduring, not just in the world, but in yourself. Build, yes, but build with awareness. Live simply,
but not fearfully. Love deeply, but never forget your own needs. And when the time comes to choose between what's easy and what's right, choose what strengthens your soul. Because the one who builds with virtue doesn't just create shelter, they create sanctuary. And that's what you were born to do. June, the seeker who learns to choose. If you were born in June, you live at the edge of change. You are the child of a shifting season, the end of spring, the beginning of summer, a moment suspended between softness and intensity. And much like that season, you carry both, light and depth, wonder and discernment, movement and thought. The Stoics believed that the soul thrives when it seeks wisdom, not passively but actively, with curiosity and courage. And you, more than most, were born a seeker. You ask questions that others are too distracted to ask. You read between the lines. You hear what wasn't said. You stand in between logic and emotion, between tradition and innovation, between speaking and listening. And because you can see both sides of most things, you are often a bridge, a translator, a mediator. The Stoics called this capacity sympathia, the understanding that we are all connected, part of a larger whole, and our role is to make that whole stronger. But your strength, like all strengths, has a shadow. Your gift for seeing everything can become a curse if you don't learn to choose. You're interested in many things, you want to experience everything, you see meaning in every direction. This makes you open, but also easily scattered. You may begin many journeys only to leave them unfinished. You may dive into new studies, new relationships, new dreams, only to grow restless when they no longer feel new. The Stoics wouldn't condemn your curiosity, but they would ask you to ground it in purpose. Epictetus warned, "If you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid." Why? Because choosing one path means ignoring 10 others, and that often makes others question you, or worse, makes you question yourself. You are capable of incredible insight. You learn quickly. You adapt easily. But too much input can lead to overload. You may spend hours thinking, reading, wondering, without ever doing. Or you may find yourself pulled in so many directions that you forget where you were even going. This is the paradox of the June-born soul, hungry for truth, yet at risk of losing clarity in the pursuit. The Stoic response? Focus on the essential. Choose what aligns with your values. Let go of the rest, not with regret, but with confidence. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "If it is not right, do not do it. If it is not true, do not say it." That clarity is your compass. In conversation, you are sharp, observant, even healing. You ask the kind of questions that help people understand themselves. People often come to you for advice, not because you have all the answers, but because you help them hear their own voice more clearly. That is a rare gift. But remember, the gift you offer others is one you must also give to yourself. Make time to hear your inner voice, not the opinions of others, not the noise of the world, but the quiet pull that calls you toward a life of meaning. You value freedom, but sometimes confuse freedom with avoidance. If something feels too heavy, too repetitive, too limiting, you may pull away, not because it lacks value, but because it threatens your sense of lightness. The Stoics would ask you to look deeper. Freedom isn't doing whatever you want, whenever you want. True freedom is mastery of your attention, the ability to stay present with something difficult, the willingness to see something through, even when the shine wears off. That's where your wisdom matures. You are drawn to complexity. You understand nuance. You enjoy the dance of ideas. But life is not a debate to win. It is a structure to build. You must decide what you will stand for, what you will carry, even when it gets heavy. Seneca said, "It is not that we are given a short life, but that we waste much of it." He wasn't condemning the curious. He was reminding us that curiosity must serve a greater aim. What are you learning for? What are you becoming? June-born individuals often make excellent teachers, writers, counselors, storytellers. Because you connect hearts and minds. You speak not just with intelligence, but with warmth. You notice people. You notice the moments others skip past. That is how you heal. But you must remember, your path is not in noticing alone. It's in following through. In choosing a direction and walking it, even when it's hard. Even when it means saying no to something else. You're not here to float endlessly from one experience to the next. You're here to discern, to weave together thought and feeling into something durable, something that matters. That doesn't mean becoming rigid. It means becoming selectively open. Not to everything, but to the right things. The things that refine your character, that build virtue, that allow you to contribute your voice in a way only you can. If you were born in June, your gift is perspective, but your growth comes through focus. You don't need to chase more knowledge. You need to slow down long enough to apply what you already know, to sit with one idea until it becomes a principle, to stay with one commitment long enough to make it real. That is how a seeker becomes a sage, not by wandering forever, but by choosing one path and walking it deeply. So choose. Choose not what looks exciting today, but what will still feel right tomorrow. Choose not what the world applauds, but what your soul respects. And in doing so, you'll stop searching for direction and start becoming it. Those, July, the guardian, who must learn to guard themselves. If you were born in July, you carry a warmth that people don't just notice, they rely on. You're the one who checks in, who remembers the little things, who cooks when someone is grieving, listens when others walk away, and shows up even when you're tired. You are a quiet constant in a world full of temporary people. The Stoics would recognize this instinct, not as sentimentality, but as a form of deep moral character. Marcus Aurelius would have called it humanity in action. To care, not out of compulsion, but out of choice. To show kindness, not because it's easy, but because it's right. You don't seek the spotlight. You seek connection, belonging. You value the idea of home, not just as a place, but as a feeling. And you often become that feeling for others. The friend who makes people feel safe. The family member who carries the emotional weight no one else will name. The partner who holds the relationship together in storms. This makes you irreplaceable. But it also makes you vulnerable. Because when you give without limit, the world will take without pause. The Stoics taught that virtue must have boundaries. Generosity must be paired with judgment. Compassion must be rooted in reason. And love, real love, must begin with the self. You are not here to be everything for everyone. You are here to live with integrity, which means learning to say yes from the soul and no without guilt. Epictetus said, "Know what you can control. Know what you must release." That includes people. That includes their moods, their reactions, their wounds you keep trying to heal. You feel deeply, maybe too deeply. The emotions of others often become your own. You may find yourself worried for someone else, long after they've forgotten the conversation. You may replay the tone in someone's voice, wonder if you gave enough, if you hurt them by accident, if you should have said more. The Stoics didn't ask us to stop feeling, but they did ask us to examine our emotions and ask, is this useful? Is this aligned with truth? Is this helping me live better? When unchecked, your kindness can become overfunctioning. You clean up what isn't yours. You hold peace at the cost of honesty. You apologize for simply existing. But that is not virtue. That is self-erasure. And the Stoics would call you back from that edge, not to harden you, but to restore your shape. They would remind you that love is not martyrdom, that boundaries are not rejection, they are structure. They are the invisible architecture that allows your care to be sustainable. You may also struggle to receive what you so freely give. Compliments, affection, help. You pride yourself on being strong, independent, reliable. But even strength needs rest. Even guardians need shelter. And it is not weak to lean. In fact, it takes more courage to accept love than to give it. Why? Because giving keeps you in control, but receiving requires trust, vulnerability, stillness. Seneca wrote, "We suffer more in imagination than in reality." And often your fear of being a burden is just that, imagination. Let people show up for you. Let the love flow both ways. You likely find meaning in service, in showing up, in doing good. That is noble. The Stoics believed the purpose of life was not pleasure or fame. It was to live in accordance with nature, to fulfill your role in the greater whole. You do that. Naturally, you hold families together. You remember birthdays. You are the glue in your circles. But do not confuse usefulness with worth. You are not lovable because of what you give. You are lovable because of who you are, even when you rest, even when you say no. Your greatest lesson may be to hold your own heart with the same care you offer others. To ask yourself, what do I need today? What am I feeling? Not just noticing in others, but in myself. The Stoics were reflective people. They journaled daily. They questioned themselves not to punish, but to align. You would do well to do the same. To make space, not just for relationships, but for silence. To find not just connection, but solitude. And to remember that your soul matters, just as much as the ones you so faithfully serve. If you were born in July, your gift is warmth. Your presence heals. Your loyalty stabilizes. You are the hearth in the home, the steady one in the storm. But your path is not just about giving love. It's about learning to hold your center while doing so. Because only when your roots are strong can others truly lean on you. Only when your cup is full can you offer what's real. So love, care, be there, but never at the cost of yourself. Never in silence, never in suppression. You were not born to disappear in the name of love. You were born to be a light, and the first soul it should illuminate is your own. August, the leader who must learn to bow. If you were born in August, you likely carry a natural presence. You walk into a room and people notice, even if you're not trying to be seen. There's something grounded, certain, and quietly commanding about you. You don't beg for attention. It arrives on its own. The Stoics would call this inner gravity, a force that pulls others in not by power, but by character. And for someone born under the blazing height of summer, it makes sense. You shine. But the question is, what do you do with that light? August-born individuals often step into leadership roles without needing to be asked. You take initiative. You make decisions when others hesitate. You carry responsibility not as a burden, but as your nature. You don't run from hard tasks, you rise to meet them. And while others flinch at being misunderstood, you often just keep moving forward. Marcus Aurelius, the Stoic emperor, lived his entire life navigating this kind of strength. "Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be," he said. Be one. That's what you do. You lead by doing. But here's the test that strength always brings: ego. When you're used to leading, when people trust you, follow you, rely on you, it's easy to mistake direction for dominance, to assume your way is the best way, to measure your worth by how many listen, how much control you have, how few challenge you. The Stoics warned against this seduction. They knew that true power is never loud, it is never needy, and it never forgets its limits. You may struggle when others don't follow through. You may grow frustrated with incompetence, indecision, or passivity. And sometimes, that frustration turns inward. You hold yourself to impossible standards and feel you can never rest because you're the strong one. But strength without rest is burnout. Leadership without listening is tyranny. Seneca said, "The greatest empire is to rule over oneself." And that is your challenge. To master not others, but your own mind. You often feel the weight of the world on your shoulders. People come to you with their problems. You carry them silently. You rarely ask for help because you believe you can handle it, and you usually can. But Stoicism doesn't celebrate suffering for its own sake. It asks us to live well, with balance, with justice, with self-awareness. You can carry the load, but you don't have to carry it alone. You are allowed to step down, to breathe, to share the burden, not because you are weak, but because you are wise. You may struggle with disappointment, not in others, but in yourself. When you fall short of your own ideals, it can feel like a betrayal. But the Stoics remind us, you are not here to be perfect. You are here to practice. Every day is a rehearsal in virtue. Every mistake is a teacher. The goal is not to be flawless, it's to be honest. To look at yourself clearly, with neither flattery nor shame, and ask, am I living with integrity today? You are naturally dignified. You often act with calm, even under pressure. But people forget that stillness isn't always peace. Sometimes it's restraint. And sometimes, beneath that strength, you're just tired. The Stoics believed in emotional discipline, but not emotional denial. Let yourself feel. Let yourself release. Cry if you must, but then return to center, not out of guilt, but out of choice. That is Stoic resilience, to fall, to reflect, and to rise without drama. Because you're used to being trusted, you may hesitate to show vulnerability. But vulnerability is not a threat to leadership. It's what makes leadership human. When Marcus Aurelius wrote his Meditations, he didn't write to impress anyone. He wrote to remind himself of what mattered, of what was hard, of where he was failing. And yet he remained one of the most revered rulers in history, not because he never faltered, but because he refused to stop trying to be good. If you were born in August, your gift is command. But your lesson is humility. You don't need to demand loyalty. It comes when your actions align with your values. You don't need to win every battle. True victory is when your soul stays intact, even in loss. You are here to lead, but not above others. Beside them, within yourself. Through example, you were not born to follow, but neither were you born to rule by force. You were born to illuminate, to inspire, to model what quiet strength looks like in practice. Let others rise with you, not under you. Let your power protect, not control. Let your voice speak truth, not dominance. And let your heart, not just your will, guide the way. Because the greatest leader isn't the one who stands tallest. It's the one who remembers to bow. To life. To truth. To the quiet voice inside that says, keep going, but go with grace. September. The mind that must learn to soften. If you were born in September, you likely see the world through a sharper lens than most. You notice details that others miss. You hear the slight shift in someone's tone. You sense the inefficiencies in a plan, the flaws in a system, the cracks in logic that others gloss over. This isn't criticism, it's clarity. You were born with a mind wired for order, precision, and truth. The Stoics called this reason, the highest faculty of the soul. And for you, it's both your gift and your burden. You want things to make sense. You want people to mean what they say, to do what they promise, to be thoughtful with their words and deliberate with their actions. You want life to be clean, organized, and fair. And when it's not, it bothers you deeply. The Stoics understood this tension well. Marcus Aurelius often reminded himself, you must be tolerant with others and strict with yourself. You, more than anyone, live this truth. Your standards are high, not just for others, but especially for yourself. You want to be better, think better, do better. You carry a quiet fear of letting others down, of making a mistake, of missing a step. That drive has probably helped you succeed, but it's also exhausted you. And here's what the Stoics would say. Excellence is not the same as perfection. Virtue does not require flawlessness. It requires effort, intention, humility. Seneca wrote, even the wise man stumbles. And if that's true for sages, it's certainly true for the rest of us. You are deeply responsible. When others panic, you stay focused. When others avoid, you step in. You are the organizer, the planner, the one who ensures the wheels keep turning. This is noble, but be careful. Being useful is not your entire identity. The Stoic path is not about being endlessly productive. It's about aligning with what matters. Ask yourself often, is this effort driven by love? Or is it fear wearing a mask? You also have a strong internal critic, that voice that says, you should have done more, said it better, fixed it faster. It follows you even in rest. The Stoics would challenge that voice, not with denial, but with reason. Is this judgment fair? Is it helping me grow? Or is it keeping me stuck in shame? Stoic reflection isn't about punishing ourselves. It's about seeing clearly, correcting gently, and moving forward with grace. Your mind is powerful, but sometimes it overreaches. It tries to organize things that were never meant to be controlled. Other people's emotions, the chaos of life, the curveballs no one saw coming. The Stoics remind us, we control our choices, not the outcomes. When your need for order becomes a need for control, suffering follows. That's when you begin trying to manage life instead of live it. And that's when your sharpness turns against you. You are not just a thinker, you are a feeler too. But your emotions tend to run through a filter of analysis. You don't often burst with feelings, you unpack them. You try to understand, explain, rationalize. But not every emotion needs a diagnosis. Some just need space. The Stoics believed in emotional discipline, but that starts with emotional acknowledgement. Don't outthink your own heart. Let it speak. Let it soften you. In relationships, you can be incredibly loyal, but you often love through doing, through fixing, through making life easier for others. But remember, people need your presence more than your performance. You don't have to be perfect to be loved. You don't have to solve everything to belong. Sometimes, the kindest thing you can offer someone is your imperfect self, fully present. Your greatest challenge is to let go without giving up. To know that your standards are noble, but they must not become a prison. You don't have to micromanage the world to feel safe. You don't have to be flawless to have peace. The Stoic teaches us to act with virtue and then release the rest. You do your part and let the universe sort out the rest. If you were born in September, your gift is discernment. Your mind can build clarity from confusion, structure from chaos. But your growth will come when you begin to trust that not everything needs to be managed, that life, like nature, often finds its own balance if we stop gripping it too tightly. So keep organizing, keep caring, keep refining, but also breathe. Let things be imperfect. Let people be messy. Let yourself be human. Because harmony isn't found in perfection, it's found in presence. And when your brilliant mind learns to trust the rhythm of life, not just the rules of it, you won't just create order, you'll create peace. Rho, the peacemaker who must learn to speak truth. If you were born in October, you carry a gift that the world often takes for granted, the ability to create harmony. You sense what's off before it erupts. You listen between the lines. You move through life like a bridge, connecting people, ideas, and spaces with care and intuition. The Stoics believed deeply in justice, in right action, in measured response. And your ability to find the middle path, to see all sides before choosing a direction, embodies the very heart of reasoned living. People trust you because you don't rush to judge. You make space for others to feel heard. You hold conversations that could have ended in division, and somehow bring them back to unity. You have a gift for diplomacy, not just in words, but in presence. You bring a kind of lightness with you, a balance. But here's the quiet tension you carry. In keeping peace outside, you often lose peace within. The Stoics would gently ask, what is the cost of always keeping the peace? Because peace, if built on silence, is not peace. It's suppression. If built on avoidance, it's fear. And if built on self-sacrifice, it's a performance. You often say yes when your soul whispers no. You hold your tongue to avoid making waves. But the Stoics remind us, virtue is not passivity, it's clarity in action. Marcus Aurelius said, if it is not right, do not do it. If it is not true, do not say it. Even if it disrupts harmony, even if it means being misunderstood. You long for connection, but connection without honesty becomes hollow. You value beauty, but beauty without truth becomes decoration. And you seek fairness, but fairness without courage becomes compliance. You were not born to keep things smooth at all costs. You were born to bring truth into balance, to speak gently but clearly, to stand in the tension and choose what is right over what is easy. You have a natural aesthetic sense, a love for symmetry, elegance, and thoughtful design. Whether it's in your environment, your relationships, or your inner world, you seek alignment. But be cautious. Not all balance is virtue. Some balance is just fear dressed up in harmony. The Stoics didn't aim for a nice life. They aimed for a just one, a truthful one. And sometimes that means letting go of the perfect image so you can live in integrity instead of illusion. You may fear confrontation, not because you're weak, but because you value peace so deeply. But remember, confrontation isn't chaos when done with love. It's clarity. And clarity is what makes relationships stronger, not silence. You don't need to yell. You don't need to fight. but you do need to show up fully, to say what's real, to risk discomfort for the sake of growth. In friendships and love, you often become the anchor, the one who keeps things gentle, smooth, predictable. But inside, you may feel invisible, like your needs come last, like your truth is quieter than everyone else's. The Stoics would urge you to look inward and ask, am I living by virtue or by habit? By fear? By comfort? Stoicism isn't about controlling others. It's about choosing yourself. Not selfishly, but truthfully, honestly, purposefully. You care deeply for others. You empathize, soften, hold space. These are beautiful traits. But you must remember, you are not responsible for everyone's emotional temperature. You don't have to keep everyone happy. You don't have to heal every wound. You don't have to be agreeable at the cost of your voice. Epictetus said, "First say to yourself what you would be, and then do what you have to do." That means making your principles clear and living from them, not waiting for the approval of others. If you were born in October, your gift is balance. But your growth lies in boldness, in learning to say what you need, to ask for what you want, to let go of what no longer reflects you. You are here to unite, not to betray yourself in the name of unity. You are here to harmonize, not to disappear for the sake of keeping the tone soft. So speak, not to win, not to please, but to honor what's real. To stand in the space between extremes and model what calm conviction looks like. Because the world doesn't just need more peacekeepers, it needs truth-tellers who speak with grace. And that, above all, is the calling you were born for. November, the alchemist who must learn to rise. If you were born in November, you likely carry a kind of quiet intensity. You're not someone who stays on the surface. You go deep, into people, into thoughts, into emotions that others would rather avoid. You don't flinch at pain. You don't look away from grief. And because of that, you often see things others miss. The Stoics would recognize you immediately, not for your darkness, but for your courage. Because the one who willingly walks through the shadows is not weak. They are becoming wise. You have lived with questions others don't ask. You felt loneliness in rooms full of people. You've heard the silence underneath someone's smile and known what it meant. This sensitivity is not a flaw. It is a signal that you were born to understand suffering and transform it. Epictetus said, "Difficulties are what show men's character." But you don't just face difficulty. You dissect it, you absorb it, you grow stronger through it. You have the soul of an alchemist, one who turns pain into strength, betrayal into boundaries, endings into rebirth. But here lies your test. You must not live in the fire forever. It's tempting to identify with pain, to make it your identity, to retreat into emotional survival mode. But Stoicism teaches that we are not what has happened to us. We are what we choose to become next. And your greatest evolution will come not just from facing the dark, but choosing to step back into the light. You are guarded, but not indifferent. Loyal, but slow to trust. You value depth over charm, honesty over ease. You do not tolerate fakery, and you have no interest in shallow games. You want to know what's real, and you're not afraid of discomfort to get there. This is why your presence feels rare. You see through things, and people either find that threatening or life-saving. But here's the weight you carry. You often feel alone in your truth. Others don't always understand your depth, your silence, your intensity. And so you learn to keep it inside. You become your own shelter. And while that's powerful, it's also lonely. The Stoics never said you must go it alone. In fact, they believed in the fellowship of wise people. They knew that connection is necessary, but it must be built on virtue, not dependency. You are fiercely independent, but sometimes that independence becomes isolation. You hide your wounds not to deceive, but to protect, to stay in control. But healing doesn't happen through control. It happens through honest exposure, not to everyone, but to those worthy of seeing you. Let others in. Not everyone, just someone. Because even the strongest soul deserves to be known. Your emotions run deep, but you don't always name them. You carry sadness like armor. You bury anger so deeply it becomes tension in your jaw, fire in your chest. The Stoics didn't teach emotional repression. They taught emotional clarity. Feel everything. Own it. But do not act on it blindly. Seneca wrote, "He who suffers before it is necessary suffers more than is necessary." And sometimes you suffer not from what is, but from what was, or what might be. You must learn to distinguish between your intuition and your fear. You are naturally introspective. You question motives, your own and others. You seek meaning behind actions. And when life breaks you open, you don't pretend it didn't hurt. You learn, you rebuild. But rebuilding is not the same as hiding. You must allow the lessons to make you better, not just stronger. Because strength alone can become hardness. What you need is resilience with softness, power with warmth. You likely feel called to things that require depth: psychology, healing, research, art, spiritual work. You don't want a job, you want a purpose. You don't want attention, you want authenticity. You are not interested in the surface of things, you want the marrow. The Stoics would admire your pursuit of essence over appearance, but they would remind you, you are not your wounds, your shadows, or your silence. You are the soul who chooses how to respond to them. If you were born in November, your gift is transformation. You are the phoenix, the healer, the mirror no one can lie to. But your growth lies in allowing light to return, in trusting again, not blindly, but bravely, in choosing joy, not instead of depth, but alongside it. You don't have to trade mystery for happiness. You just have to believe that both can belong in you. You are not here to stay hidden. You are here to emerge, to speak, to soften, to lead from the truth of what you've survived, not as a warning, but as a light. Because when someone who has lived in the dark dares to smile, it teaches the rest of us that healing is real, that strength doesn't need to be loud, that scars can become symbols, not of pain, but of power. December. The sage who must learn to come down from the mountain. If you were born in December, there's a good chance people have always seen you as older than your years. You carry a calmness that doesn't come from convenience, but from having thought things through deeply and privately. You're a philosopher at heart. You reflect before reacting. You look at the big picture, even when others are fixated on the noise. The Stoics would have called you a natural student of wisdom, but they also would have given you a quiet challenge. Don't stay in the clouds. Bring what you've learned back to earth. You are the kind of person who asks the bigger questions. You may have been that way since childhood. Why are we here? What's the point? What does it all mean? And unlike many who stop asking, you never did. You're drawn to meaning through spirituality, philosophy, books, dreams, or simply long walks with your own thoughts. You don't just want to live. You want to understand how to live well. And that's the first step on the Stoic path.
But here's where you often get stuck.
You live so much in vision, in contemplation, in potential, that you sometimes miss the moment in front of you. You're not detached out of coldness. You're detached because you're observing, interpreting, calculating. But the Stoics were action philosophers. They didn't write essays to impress. They wrote meditations to keep themselves awake. Marcus Aurelius ruled an empire, but he wrote to himself like a student. Stoicism isn't about ideas. It's about embodied wisdom, knowing how to act, when to speak, and when to simply be. You likely carry a quiet hopefulness, even in the darkest times. A belief that something good is still possible. This is not naivety. It's resilience. Even after setbacks, you search for perspective. You look for patterns. You try to grow from the fall. This makes you a natural guide for others, a counselor, a mentor, a calm voice in the storm. But remember, the teacher must also live what they teach. Stoicism asks not, "What do you believe?" but "What do you practice daily when it's hard?" Because of your broader perspective, you may sometimes feel disconnected from the messiness of everyday life. You see the drama. You understand the emotional undercurrents, but it can all feel tiring, even small. And so, you drift. You pull away. You disappear into your thoughts. The Stoics would say, that's understandable, but incomplete. Philosophy isn't about escaping the world. It's about entering it with clarity and composure. You must walk the marketplace, not just the mountain. You may also struggle with grounding your goals. You see the vision, you believe in the outcome, but the middle, the practice, the structure, the systems, that's where you resist. You can be so focused on what could be that you grow frustrated with what is. But the Stoics didn't romanticize the future. They worked with what was present. They asked, what is in my control? What can I do well today? And they found freedom in that narrow but powerful lane. December-born people often blend intellect with heart. You don't just want to think clearly, you want to care deeply. But you do so from a distance at times. You may love humanity more than you love the day-to-day of human behavior. But you are needed not just as a thinker, but as a presence. As someone who speaks up, who steps in, who translates wisdom into warmth. You have the potential to be a quiet lighthouse in a noisy, reactive world. But you must be careful not to isolate your light. Epictetus reminded us, don't explain your philosophy, embody it. You don't need to convince others. You need to become so aligned with your principles that they feel your character before you say a word. That's Stoicism, not a theory, but a rhythm. If you were born in December, your gift is vision. Your soul sees beyond. But your growth lies in returning to the present, in grounding the abstract into something someone else can touch, feel, or learn from. You don't need to simplify your thoughts. You just need to live them in ways others can recognize. So write your ideas, but also live them. Teach, but also listen. Dream, but also begin. Because the world doesn't need more philosophers in towers. It needs sages in everyday clothes. It needs you, not just thinking about how to be a good person, but becoming one, through daily acts of integrity, clarity, and courage. You are the final chapter of the year. Not because you're last, but because you close the loop. Because your wisdom is a door. And when you open it, others remember what really matters. Not achievement, not applause, but a life lived from the inside out, with stillness, with conviction, and with light.